the discussion and so forth.
Good evening, Council.
Garcia.
Good evening, Mayor, teammates. Rebecca Garcia, Housing Manager. Item number 21. This is really a recap of the conversation we had with the Council at the Housing Workshop on September 26th, but I will give you a brief overview of what was previously discussed. The housing ordinance before you includes a variety of different components. We are doing some reorganization in the Muni Code. And really the first thing is presenting new housing in lieu fees. We're recommending new fees to appropriately correspond to the recently adopted inclusionary housing ordinance. The council adopted 15% for units being built outside of downtown and 10% inclusionary for projects within the downtown. The city retained Kaiser Marston to conduct an analysis of the impact of the inclusionary housing ordinance and to estimate the financial cost to developers providing on-site BMR units. Based on KMA's fees, staff is recommending $19.70 per square foot for ownership projects outside of downtown, $13.20 per square foot for ownership projects in the downtown, $29 per square foot for rental projects outside of downtown, and $14.50 per square foot for rental projects in the downtown. An example of what that calculation would look like, for example, if the project has 56 market rate units and the average habitable square footage of each unit is 2,000 square feet, the in lieu housing fee calculation, if we were going to use 1970 as a baseline, would be multiplied by 56 units times 2,000 square feet, equaling a little over $2.2 million as a total housing fee. Also in the ordinance is the BMR program participation guide. Before we go into this, I'd like to just kind of remind us about what the below market rate program's purpose and mission is. And the mission is to provide ownership opportunities to families in the low and moderate income categories. For example, a family of 4 earning no more than $94,000 a year is low income today. A family of 4 earning a maximum of $150,000 is moderate income today. So we all know that's a lot of people. We've created 2 guides. We used to call them manuals, and it was 1 manual, but now we've broken it out into 2 guides. The participation guide is really geared towards current BMR homeowners. And the majority of the information is the same. It talks about how you would determine a resale price, annual compliance information, capital improvements, but there are two topics that I want to draw your attention to that are new. The first would be ownership and estate planning. So we have added some language in the participation guide. We've added a revocable transfer on death deed form approved by the state, and this form will be used by us to designate who the beneficiary is so that we're crystal clear on who the home would go to in the event of a death or owner due proceeds. In the event that a death of an owner, BMR owner, takes place and a transfer occurs, the person inheriting the home must have their income and eligibility reviewed and approved to determine if they are an eligible purchaser. If approved, new documents will need to be recorded and the 45-year deed restriction clock will start all over again. New purchasers of BMR units may not purchase BMR units through living trusts, and existing homeowners cannot transfer through a living trust. So that's some of the new language we've added to the guide to make it more clear. The second topic that we talked about at great length at the last workshop was staff is recommending that BMR homeowners who have some of the older agreements are able to are permitted to receive a minimum return on their down payment plus 10% simple interest. This primarily is geared for households in the Viale and the Madrone developments because they have older agreements and complicated financing that in today's market means if they sell with their old agreement, they get nothing and sometimes are underwater. So our recommendation for BMR homeowners is that they at least receive their initial out-of-pocket down payment plus an annual return based on the number of years that they occupied the unit. For example, if an owner made a down payment contribution of $20,000 to purchase the BMR home and they go to sell 7 years later, the city would use a 10% rate of return for every year that they lived in the home. This would mean at the end of the day, if they sold today, they would get a return of $34,000. So that is staff's recommendation, but of course the council could choose to leave their agreements as is, no change, or to allow just the down payment returned. In the ordinance is also a BMR program application guide. This is really geared towards folks who are interested in the program so they can understand the eligibility criteria, title and mortgage requirements, income eligibility, asset limitation, first-time home buyer criteria, reasonable accommodation requests. We've also revised our BMR development standards, and we've also always had these. They are geared towards market rate projects that have BMR units sprinkled throughout, but we just made it very clear that they're not for 100% affordable housing projects. We also added a provision to provide us with some flexibility to approve other reasonable options when a developer or a project is offering us an opportunity to meet our regional housing needs allocation goals. So for the most part, they very much remain the same. We just added language around those two areas. We did some reorganizing of the muni codes. We previously had things in Chapter 15, but we are repealing the previous old affordable housing fee, placing it under the new Chapter 14, and repealing Chapter 15.23, the old below market rate program, and placing it also in Chapter 14, so everything's nice and neat in one chapter. So in summary, the ordinance includes new housing in lieu fees, adding the below market rate program, Chapter in 14, incorporating a BMR ownership program participation guide and application guide, BMR development standards, and repealing the older chapters 15.22 and 15.23. As next steps, staff will incorporate council's feedback, and we will return to you with the final version of the application guide and the participation guide for adoption. That concludes my presentation, and I have Kaiser Marston here and also Julius from House Keys if you have any questions.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Garcia, I have a question regarding the estate. In the agenda item, it says one of the lines was the owner of a BMR unit should keep in mind that the estate of the owner is entitled to the owner due proceeds upon any transfer that takes place during the agreement term. Is that just the down payment and then the lease?
Exactly.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay.
Julius, am I correct? The owner do, yeah, let me let
Phoning a friend.
finance expert.
So the way the agreements work now, you can resell the house based on an index. So for instance, if the index has gone up 20% since you purchased, you could buy the house for $200,000, increase it by 20% to $240,000. So that $40,000 is due to the family. And then so if the person were to inherit that, they inherited their parents' basis because that's always due to the estate. So in addition to that, we're trying to make sure that they can reset the term as the owner and continue with their parents' house, but they are due, the estate is due that money.
But they can only continue as long as they meet the criteria.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's giving them both the option of getting the estate and continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you tried to explain it to us last time, but I'm still trying to understand especially the Madrone situation. So they got assistance to pay a mortgage, but then the house was sold at market. So why is that called a below market rate house?
That's a good question. Yes, they purchased the home at market rate, but only because they received so much subsidy from a variety of different agencies, so much down payment. So it was below market rate in the sense that they were able to get into the home with a lower income, but at the end of the day, they had a market rate sales price. They would have never been able to get in without so much subsidy in between. It's not something we would do today, but sometimes we're kind of untangling things that were done in the past. I also think that because South County Housing, the developer that created both of these projects was going out of business at that time, running out of money. I'm not sure if that influenced the way they set prices as well.
What I'm still trying to figure out, so they got, and I understand it was supposed to be a help, and there was nothing wrong with it, but they got significant support to buy the house. And now you're proposing to change the model to help them even more.
No, I would say right now they're not in a good position because if they, and Julius, correct me if I'm wrong, but if they sell right now, they will get nothing back because they'll still owe all of that down payment assistance back to all those different agencies. So really all we're trying to do is help them get to a point where our existing BMR homeowners are, because our current agreements and our current new homeowners have the benefit of getting their down payment back and a 10% back.
Right. So we got an email from one of the owners, and I think that swayed me a bit into changing my mind on this topic a little bit. They'd love to move out and buy a bigger home, but because they would end up owning and couldn't even obviously then not afford another down payment, they're kind of stuck.
Correct.
And so I look at, if I were to agree, as this being incentive to that kind of current owners to actually move up, so and free up that. And now that's where I have the next question. So is that house then, if that were to happen, would that house then still be a below market rate, or what would that be, since it never really was?
Yes, it would be a below market rate home, and we would find a new income qualified family and record a new 45-year deed restriction.
Do you have any idea how many of those, I don't want to name the name of the person, but do you know how many of those cases might be around that might want to move out or move up?
I'm going to ask Julius to comment on that since he works very closely with our BMR homeowners.
Yeah, so there were 72 units in that development project.
And do you know how many would like, currently, I only know of one who emailed us, who would like to move up?
I think they all would like the opportunity because of the subsidy. The subsidy challenge that wasn't placed due to the amount of interest that was accruing. It affects all the homeowners that got more than $80,000 to $100,000 in down payment assistance. Everybody in that situation accrued a lot beyond their original down payment.
Okay, let me rephrase my question. If we were to enact that change now, how many of the current owners would sell the house and move and buy another home? What would that trigger, other than the one person that approached us?
Well, we've only received about 12 resale requests for the project, but that's not with this rule in place. So we'd have to put the rule in place and get a sense for how many people are going to actually request to sell as a result.
But we've already received the inquiry from
Yes.
12 families.
Well, okay. I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
an understanding what we're talking about. Thank you.
Ms. Yakumovich.
Just to follow up on Mr. Spring's point, once those homes are turned over, they would not be turned over under these old rules. They would be true below market rate homes. So they would not fall in the category that he's concerned about,
Correct.
where they would be these sort of quasi below market rate.
Correct. And they wouldn't be receiving as much down payment assistance because it's just not available today in that quantity.
Julius, did you say there were 72 units in that project?
Julius, is that Madrone or Viale or both?
Just from the draw.
Madrone.
And did all 72 of them, were they all purchased under similar arrangements with massive assistance, where the house was bought at full market value and lots of assistance programs were brought in? I remember when we did that.
Yeah, it was split. So what happened is that normally you price a below market rate unit based on the incomes, and then people that buy fit the income level. In Madrone, the market crashed while at the same time that unit went to market. And so the people, there's about 50% of the units were low income. So they kept the sale price the same, and they provided more subsidy for the low-income households versus the moderate-income households got a smaller subsidy. So moderate income was about half the project with about 90,000 or more down payment assistance, and then you had low-income units that had $200,000, $150,000 in down payment assistance.
So not all 72 of these are underwater.
They're underwater within certain degrees. So everyone now is fine because they're all at market rate. The fair market value of the home is now exceeded what most people bought it for, well, what everybody bought it for. Yeah. So nobody's technically underwater right now from a fair market value, but as far as people accruing enough interest on their down payment assistance that overpowers their down payment, that depends on what everybody put down.
So when we approve this tonight, not all 72 units are going to need this new program in order to move up into a new home.
Correct.
Okay.
This is really just one option for
Yeah.
those that need it.
And is it really the Madrone? This situation that we had at Madrone is really the one in the city that we need to do this to, or is this elsewhere?
It's primarily Madrone. Most of the projects that happened in 2006 to 2008 that went to market around that time, which is about Madrone Plaza, Viale, those units. There's only about 3 or 4 projects that would even possibly have gone to market during that time span.
Have contracts like that. Okay.
And the current ones are not like that.
Yeah, right. And then another question for you, Rebecca, and maybe you answered this last time. How did we decide on a 10% rate of return? Why 10%?
You go ahead.
So in all of our agreements right now, just to clarify, the 10% is what's in agreements right now. So the way they're structured is you would get the increase in income since you purchased, or 10% on your down payment, whichever is higher. So that's literally how our agreements are structured right now, written on Madrone Plaza and other projects similar to that.
Okay, so walk me through that. So I'm a homeowner, and if my income has increased to a certain amount, then I wouldn't be eligible for that 10% year over year of value on my down payment.
Yes, so the
Grown a certain amount, I'm guessing less than 10%,
Yes.
then I would gain interest on my down payment.
Yeah, so it's an either or today, and we're trying to use it in situations where, yes, the AMI incomes may have gone up more, but you're still underwater on your down payment, so we don't have that option right now. Because it's
Okay.
either or, you can't use both.
So, but I'm still curious, why 10%? Is that based on some type of growth of the AMI? Is that based on, I mean, I don't know a whole lot of salaries that increase 10% a year, and I'd love to find an investment that makes me 10% a year.
Well, median income grew 16% this year. So the agreements that I've seen that have had this 10% return, that has been in a lot of the agreements. So whenever they've had an income-based index, I've always seen this 10% rule in there. And that's other cities as well. So it's not just Morgan Hill agreements. Whenever they have an agreement that's based on AMI, they always give the option to get a return on your down payment, whichever is higher.
Yeah. I guess I still don't understand how we got to 10%. That's
Yeah, just
did
using
we
the
just
standard.
find it was a nice round number. What is it based on? Because like I said,
I know we wouldn't go higher than 10%,
Yeah.
but it's been in the agreements for a while. I mean, we can research.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Right.
What we could if we research, we would look at the agreements that are in place throughout the Bay Area. It's something about the fact that when incomes go up, or if your resale restriction agreement is based on any income tied number, so HCD every year produces our county based income number. They give this option of down payment either or. So we just stayed consistent with what those
I
agreements
totally
are.
get the either or.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I just don't understand why we're saying that we're going to say every year, no matter what, you get 10% on your down payment. Now, again, it could be either or, but there are some years my retirement account goes up by 3%. There are some years where it tanks and goes down by 10%. So I just don't get where we came with 10%, why we pin 10% in every year for an investment on someone's down payment.
And
An
I
option,
wouldn't say it's no matter what, because the market conditions have to be healthy enough like they are today to allow somebody to get this back. If the market crashes, they get nothing the way a regular market rate homeowner would get nothing. Am I correct?
yes, there has to be enough program equity to be able to compensate the 10%. The option, and I get your point, is that if you tie it to an index, like CPI or AMI, that is an option. So you can say, you know, your down payment return can be based on the movement in consumer price index, which is an option on what you typically see on the sale price. Because sale prices are typically based on some kind of index, but the down payment returns and agreements are typically based on some kind of percentage. So whatever percentage is chosen, we can decide arbitrarily that we decide this percentage works. But the only way to answer your question and create an objective index would be to use something like the Bureau of Labor Statistics or ACD and say, we'll rely on those indices to tell us what your returns are versus trying to make up an arbitrary percentage. So I get your point, and that might be the answer for that, is to try to use an index versus trying to come up with a percentage.
And we can certainly research that and come
Yeah.
back.
And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm opposed to this. I think you have come up with a really great idea here. I've always thought BMR homes are to get someone started, and if they're getting started and then find that they owe more than what they put into the house, we really haven't helped anyone out. Mm-hmm. So finding ways to help them and help them move into their next house and open up that house for someone who's starting again. And if this is the way to do it, I'm just trying to understand why that percentage increase every year. Yeah. If it can be tied to some kind of index, I think that justifies it a lot better. But I don't want to necessarily hold this up tonight based on that. Perhaps that part could come back to us with some ideas on what that might look like. And once we look at it, we may find that just setting 1% makes a lot of sense. But I think we should look at that at least.
Sure.
Mr. Spring. Yeah, would you mind going back to slide number, I think 7, if I see that correctly? Yeah, so here you say, I guess you propose a recommendation, but the gentleman said it's already in the agreement, so I'm getting lost now.
Sorry. So we're proposing this recommendation for the smaller number of people in Madrone and Viale. But the newer agreements, if somebody purchased a BMR home today, they would already benefit from this type of thing because the current agreements are already written this way.
Okay, the Madrone and some in that area don't have that yet.
Correct.
So the recommendation is just for those.
Small, yes.
Okay, but what if the market would crash? So they all of a sudden their house is worth 200. They paid down 100, so they will still get 150,000 back or something.
Yeah, there's a contingency based on the market.
I don't see that here. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, it may not be on the slide, but it is in the guidelines. So they only receive this benefit if the market is healthy enough to allow them to. If the market crashes, they receive nothing the way the rest of us would receive nothing.
Okay, I'm just looking at the slide that in front of me, and I heard you saying it, but I don't see it written down, and that's why I wanted to ask one more time. Yeah, Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing. Do we have any speaker?
Jeff Bernstein.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Bernstein. I live in a BMR townhouse at Madrone Plaza. I taught at Sobrado High School from 2007 to 2014. Mr. Mayor, you were a guest speaker in my civics class. Although I no longer work in Morgan Hill, I am still an active member of the community. A few weeks ago, City held a workshop to discuss some of the issues and potential solutions for the BMR contracts. I do not want to come across as ungrateful, as I'll be the first to acknowledge the benefits of living in this community and having an affordable monthly mortgage payment. However, I would like to further explain why I feel the council should adopt the proposed minimum return on down payment policy, as well as consider using consumer price index instead of area median income when determining the restricted resale price of a BMR home. As the city attorney said during the workshop, if the city of Morgan Hill wants those who will benefit most from the BMR program to occupy BMR homes, then there must be an incentive for current BMR homeowners to sell and move on. As I explained in prior communication with the council, as a single 24-year-old teacher, living in a home I owned at an affordable price was a dream come true. 9 years later, a wife, and 2 kids later, the home no longer meets my needs. I would like to sell my house and purchase a non-BMR home, however I'm stuck. With real estate prices as high as they are in this area, I do not have the ability to sell my BMR house and buy another home in the area unless I receive some sort of return on the investment I have made in my current home. I did not buy a BMR home to get rich, but I did anticipate, based on the example written in the contract I signed, that I would see a reasonable return when I would eventually sell my house. I believe there are other BMR homeowners who find themselves in similar situations. Due to hard work, additional education, and changes in life circumstances, they no longer need to be in the BMR program. However, due to the negative return they will see when they go to sell their home, they cannot afford to move. Please make it worth our while to exit the program in such a way that keeps the home affordable for a new BMR homeowner while also allowing us to move on without needing additional assistance in our next house. I hope the council shares my belief that the goal of BMR homeownership should be for a limited time, to allow the participant to benefit from the program and then move on when that benefit is no longer needed, and not stay in the BMR program forever. Earlier today, I sent the council an email with a comp sheet that I attached. The sheet compares my house with a non-BMR house in my development. Although the price per square foot of the 2 homes was identical when they were both built and sold in 2009, the price per square foot of the non-BMR home has increased by 65%, while the price per square foot of my BMR house is only allowed to increase by 18%, given the current formula used to determine resale price. Due to the way the formula is currently written, if I were to sell my house today, I would see a return on investment of negative 59%, while the non-BMR house would see a positive return of 40%. I will not be able to stay in Morgan Hill with this type of return on the sale of my home. Please adopt the proposed minimum return on down payment policy, as well as consider using the CPI index instead of AMI when determining the restricted resale price of a BMR home, so that Morgan Hill residents like me can sell our BMR homes and afford to stay in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein.
I have no other speaker cards.
Okay, nobody else, so we'll close public comment and the public hearing and enter into council discussion. Mr. Constantine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is exactly what Morgan Hill is about. And this is why Morgan Hill has per capita more BMRs than any city in the county. And I think Mr. Bernstein encapsulated exactly the plight of some BMR owners. And when I say plight, it's plight. I don't know how quite to couch it, so I'm just going to say that the American dream is to own a home. And we make that possible through our BMR program. But also, it's the American dream to see a profit from that said home. And again, I think Mr. Bernstein encapsulated perfectly what an owner of a BMR, although they are very grateful to own a home in this beautiful city, they also have an expectation of being able to move up, as some of my colleagues have said. So I am grateful to the fine work that Ms. Garcia and staff has done, as well as House Keys, for putting forth this program and making it such a success. And I'm in favor of these steps to make sure that we clarify the program a little bit better, but we also give certainty to the owners of BMRs, because it's not just getting into a home, but it's also realizing the American dream that we all want to realize, that yes, I bought a house and I'm also gaining equity, and I'm also gaining something, and I can move up, because that's really everyone's dream. And it shouldn't be our job, or it shouldn't be our only thought to get them in the house and then say, that's it, you don't get anything else. So I'm very appreciative again of this work and putting this together. And I think this is a fantastic step, again, to help this small minority of people that this affects. But again, it makes that home ownership something that we all cherish in our city. And again, I just want to applaud staff for the fine work, and Mr. Bernstein for your fine words. Thank you very much.
Ms. Yakumovich.
Our housing issues in Morgan Hill are very easily the most complex and the binder that I received from Ms. Garcia when I started as a council member with all of the housing issues is, other than law school, sort of the largest reading material I've ever been handed on a single issue. I think that you have done an incredible job in explaining this to us. I mentioned at the last time this was brought up, the knowledge that you bring to the table is, with our consultant or with House Keys as well, is incredible. We didn't have an opportunity to look at your graphs and charts again, but they are on this presentation. I think that you have explained the issue very well, and I am in full support of all of your proposals. I'm going to give 2 additional reasons that you haven't mentioned tonight, as well as everything that you've said. I think one sort of thought that came up the last time we talked about this is, what are we thinking when we put someone in a BMR? What is the policy purpose? Are we housing people? And Ms. Garcia, you responded that in your mind, we are giving people some kind of equity. And to me, it's as simple as, we have a rental assistance program, and some people qualify for the rental assistance program. And in that program, we are trying to help get people with put roofs over their heads. This is a different program, and people have entered this program with a different expectation. And I think there are plenty of times that the government lets us down with our expectations. We have an opportunity here to right a wrong, which is we have entered into some of these bad AMI agreements, and it does not make a lot of sense as these people are trying to get out of those agreements. We have an opportunity as the government to do the right thing and say, let's do something for these people that makes common sense. The issue of the return on the down payment, I don't know, maybe we can go to the slides that have the AMI versus the CPI index? I completely understand the hesitation towards the sort of arbitrary percentage, right? The sort of, we're coming up with 10% and that's what we're sticking with. It's slides 16 and 17. So this is the CPI if we go back to the AMI one. When we're talking about the return on somebody's initial down payment, we're not talking currently, in my mind, these contracts that we're trying to fix, these AMI contracts, we're not thinking about them going forward, right? We're thinking about righting a wrong that's happened in the past. So we are looking at, we know what the market did between then and now. We know that between 2003 and 2008 and now, the market has done incredibly well. So we can safely say between then and now, you reasonably can get a 10% return on that down payment investment because we already know what the market did in that time. Now going forward from here, that's when it's, you know, what's going to happen, we don't know. As you said, it might be higher than 10%. The last year, when we're looking at the incomes, not the market, but when we're looking at the income growth, it's 16%. But what we're trying to do is say, what's fair for people that made this investment all of those years ago? And so we can safely say that between then and now, the market did very well. I had a tiny little house in San Jose that I bought in 2012, and the value of that house doubled, which is the only reason that I'm in a home today. We know that the market did very well. So I'm comfortable with saying that it makes sense to give those people that 10% return on that down payment. I'm happy to have the conversation about what makes sense going forward, but I don't think that that's an unreasonable percentage based on that. I am grateful that you have recognized this sort of wrong, if you will, for people, this thing that doesn't make sense, and you've brought a reasonable solution to us so that we can help people in this most fundamental, basic worry in people's lives. And I hope that we are able to make this decision and that we can do a lot of good for these people. Thanks.
Well said. Thank you. Anything, Mr. Carr?
Ready to make a motion, yeah.
Please do.
Okay, I would move to waive the first and second reading of the ordinance.
Motion is second to waive. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Move to introduce the ordinance that adds
Don't read all
the
that.
chapters as designated in the staff report.
I hope it has a shorter title than. I'll second it, and I'll ask the deputy city clerk to read the title, which I hope is shorter.
An ordinance of the City of Morgan Hill adding new Chapter 14.08 in lieu housing fee to Title 14 Housing of the Morgan Hill Municipal Code, establishing in lieu fees for new residential development ownership and rental projects within the city, and adding Chapter 14.12 below market rate program, which incorporates a new below market rate ownership program participation guide and a new below market rate ownership program application guide, and repealing Chapter 15.22 affordable housing fee and 15.23 below market rate program. Mayor Tate?
Aye.
Council members Carr?
Aye.
Constantine? Yakumovich?
Aye.
Spring.
And Mayor, I would like to see that percentage come back. And I think Ms. Yakumovich has a really good point. If you could bring it back so we look at where we've come from and where we think we're going. Because we could look at those two very different ways, as was suggested. So that'd be good to bring that back. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, very good. That completes item number 21. We have 4 items left to go. There's an update on our agricultural preservation strategy and a potential related land use consideration. Mr. Yulo.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Anthony Yulo from the Community Services Department. We sort of have a two-pronged item here for you tonight. The first, as the mayor indicated, is an update on our agricultural conservation program and the strategy moving forward, which I'll begin with, and then we'll have some policy questions to ask the council for some input on. So, the council is very well versed because you recently approved a property purchase in